Welcome back to our channel. President Tinubu is back in Nigeria after his high-profile trips to the UK and France, but what really went down? Plus, the presidency just dropped a whopping N10BN budget for solar power. Is that a bold move from someone who promised constant electricity or another spending spree? Stick around as we break it all down.
President Bola Tinubu has returned after an 18-day working visit and retreat in France and London. The presidential 001 aircraft touched down at the Nnamdi International Airport in the FCT at 9:50 p.m. on Monday, according to the State Media House office. The president was received by his chief of staff, Femi Gbajabiamila, FCT Minister Nyesom Wike, National Security Advisor Nuhu Ribadu, Secretary to the Government of the Federation, George Akome, and other top officials. Let's take a look. Now, the president's arrival follows the worsening insecurity in several parts of the country, including states like Plateau and Benue. Christians under the aegis of the church leaders' denominational forum across Plateau State on Easter Monday protested in Jos, the state's capital, over the recent killings in Bokos and Bassa local government areas, which claimed about 100 lives and led to the destruction of a lot of property. In a video now making rounds on social media, Plateau Christian women were seen chanting, "We need peace." Let's take a look. Now, before we get into the conversation, we should talk about the Catholic Bishop of Sokoto Diocese, Matthew Hassan Kuka, who has raised concerns over Nigeria's worsening security crisis, saying that the country is turning into a national morgue. And I would like to just halt on that note and bring this conversation to the fore right now. This video completely broke my heart, because I keep asking the question, is insecurity a priority for our leaders? Is it a priority? Because whatever needs to be said has been said. Whoever needs to be called on has been called on. But for some reason, it keeps falling on deaf ears, and we keep saying the same thing every time.
Okay, I said earlier that many Nigerians will be delighted that President Tinubu is back in the country. Mm-hmm. He had been away for almost more than 2 weeks. We were told he was on working visit to France, and then he showed up in London. We're still insisting. I repeat the point I made originally about transparency and accountability. What did he do while on that working visit? He had a meeting with a junior official from the United States, but are there other details that Nigerians would like to know? But beyond all of that, Nigerians are concerned because they want their president to be around, because he's the man who leads, he's the man who has the authority, particularly when he stays within the threshold of the Constitution and he doesn't exceed 21 days. So he will not have any compulsion, to hand over to the vice president. But even then, maybe the vice president should have played a more central role. Now that he has returned, there are issues that are on the table. Insecurity is number one. There are Nigerians who are saying that the president of Nigeria should declare a state of emergency on insecurity, because we have had a resurgence in Borno State, in Benue, in Plateau. We have women, offering prayers. We have the elite, among us, also, expressing a lot of concern. So insecurity is a major thing that he needs to deal with. It's number one, so that people can have confidence, their trust in government can be rebuilt, and then they can know that this is beyond politics, and that government is committed to its responsibility under Section 14, Sub 2 of the 1999 Constitution, which says the primary responsibility of the Nigerian government shall be the security and welfare of the Nigerian people. The other issues that he will have to deal with is the economy. The economy is floundering in the context of global uncertainty. Revenue may be a problem. Oil prices are going down. The dollar is in a very bad place, creating disruptions across the world. And then number three, as I pointed out earlier on this same program, there are issues within his own party, with some people saying they are leaving the party, some people saying they will stay within the party, a lot of confusion. And then persons like Waziri Adamawa and Mr. Peter Obi and Malam Nasir El-Rufai saying they will form a coalition to get him out of government in 2027. So now is the time for the president to sit down and take even a second look at his team and make sure that all hands are on deck. But he's a politician. Politicians are always interested in their own survival. So I just make the point to draw attention to these major issues about his own survival. I'm sure you will understand that. But the one that concerns us is about our security, welfare, and the challenges of togetherness in Nigeria.
Absolutely. Bye.
Well, in the 19 days that the president spent out of the country, 120 people are reported to have died from the various spates of insecurity bedeviling various parts of the country. That's 120 too many. But what does a vacuum in leadership cause? It creates room for other people to come and start chiming in possible solutions that may not be the way forward. We saw the video that was trending of the former Minister of Defense, T.Y. Danjuma, saying that people should carry arms and defend themselves. And you can't blame him for saying that, because where are the government structures? Where is the state? Where is the state security architecture that is supposed to step in at this point? So people are feeling helpless, but we know that this self-help is not the answer. Because if you look at what happened in Uromi, that was the result of self-help. It's a recipe for anarchy. You also have some presidential advisors, I believe it was Daniel Bwala, who was saying that, well, the governors need to do more in terms of making use of their security votes to secure their states. Meanwhile, the president was saying that, well, governors, specifically for Plateau State, the governor should go into the community and do more community healing. Well, all of these different solutions have their own merits and demerits, but ultimately, the one thing that stands out is the vacuum that is created when there isn't decisive strategy. There isn't a decisive methodology in which we've decided that, okay, this is how we're going to tackle this. If you look at the international headlines around the insecurity that took place in April, the headlines were shameful. They were sad to see. And once it gets onto the international stage, it also gets fueled by their own narrative. And it made it seem as though Christians cannot walk freely in Nigeria, which we know is far from the truth. But this is what happens when we're not home to tackle our issues, tackle these challenges. This is a 2-decade-old problem. Unfortunately, it is cropping itself up again. The governor seems to have answers. He seems to know why it's recurring. The community seem to know why it's recurring. So where is the decisive strategy for us to say, okay, this is the kinetic, non-kinetic, all the strategies we always say we like to use. Where is that? And while we're waiting for that, let's put a human face to this. Earlier in the show, when we were talking about the Pope, I said the image that sticks with me about the Pope is when he kissed the feet of the president of South Sudan at the time when there was civil war and there were issues around coups and so forth. And nobody's asking the president to kiss anybody's feet. But I'm just saying that show of leadership that says, I'm with you, I feel your pain, I cry with you, and I hope we'll be able to see the president commiserating with these communities very soon. As we've seen, the Minister of Defense has done, a number of notable individuals have done so, but now let us fill that vacuum, that void of leadership with some decisive action.
I like that you brought up the fact that this is not just a now problem. This has been going on for years. And it's not issues that we do not already know, whether it's the farmer header crisis, whether it's the militant groups or it's Boko Haram. These are issues that have been identified, but where is the decisive action?
Well, I think that's the question now. So I think just looking ahead, being that the president has now returned, what we need to shift our focus on is now that he is back, what can we expect? What is he going to do? Because I do think, to answer the question you mentioned earlier, I do think that insecurity is a priority to the president. I truly do. I can't imagine that any leader of a country would not be concerned that his people are dying. So I do think that this is a huge priority for him. Where the mistake is that sometimes these decisions would paint a different picture. But I do think that him making sure that the safeguarding of his people is his first and foremost priority. I do believe that. And I think that naturally as people, we have to have some form of belief in our leadership. What he needs to shift focus on now is really making sure that the people believe that. And we speak so much about 2027 and about his re-election or who will come out as the coalition against him. It just feels so distasteful when we spend so much time talking about politics. And that's a criticism of the presidency too, that we really need to focus on the issues of the day-to-day, which is insecurity, and making sure that you are doing something to put a face to these concerns. Ultimately, when people are going through any type of hardship, what they want to know is that they are being cared for, that their plight is being recognized. And I think a way that the president can do that is actually showing his face in these communities. And we hope that eventually he will do that.
Eventually, Bill, speaking about paying so much attention to the politics, let's take another story that definitely has gotten a lot of attention. The governor of Akwa Ibom, has reaffirmed that his support for President Bola Tinubu's second term is intentional and not a betrayal of his political party. Last week, a member of the People's Democratic Party declared that Tinubu of the All Progressives Congress will complete an 8-year tenure. Speaking at a rally in Ikot's Ekmene local government area, the governor said his decision is rooted in sincerity and will be explained in due time. Let's take a look at that.
We have moved beyond party lines. We now have unity government, whether from PDP and APC. And that's why each time we have the privilege of coming together, we are showing an example to Nigeria that we need to work together. We need to respect what and who God has honored so that people will also respect you. Me, I'm supporting Baba Bola Ahmed Tinubu for second term so that he can complete what he has started. You will see what he is doing for our state, and you will know why we should not go elsewhere.
Now, in the spirit of the story, and obviously the governor's a pastor, so I believe he will be very apt to say that he is very much aware of certain verses in the Bible. I'm just going to mention two of them. The first being that you cannot serve two masters at one time. You must either love one and hate the other. The second being a house divided against itself cannot stand. Looking at these two verses, I'm trying to understand when he says, I'm doing this in all security. I think would it be safe to then say that this is officially the governor saying, I have no faith in the party that put me here. He also mentioned Akpabio, reaffirming that he will equally get a second term. That is, the governor will get a second term. So he's basically telling us that he doesn't believe in this party anymore. And this is where he stands. It will be safe to believe that, Dr. Abati. What would you say to that?
Oh, okay. You recall that PDP governors, they met recently. I think this was in Oyo State.
Yes.
They were hosted by Governor Sheyi Makinde. And one thing that came out of that meeting was PDP governors saying they will not be part of any coalition politics. And that, look, Atiku Abubakar and others, they could go on their own. That was in itself already a clear signal of the way the mind of some of the governors are working. And now you have a pastor in Umo of, Cross River State, of Akwa Ibom State, saying, look, it is Baba Tinubu that he will support, but he didn't say he will leave the PDP. So he will stay within the PDP and support the president of another party. Because he says, what the Lord has done, you have to support it. And he was speaking in the context of the flag of the Akwa Ibom section of the Lagos-Calabar highway. But his position probably speaks to a tendency that we had seen from the Ibadan meeting of the PDP governors. And he also said he will support Senator Godswill Akpabio, who had since moved from the PDP to the APC, and who is known as a fanatic and loyalist of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. I think all of this is just about 2027. Perhaps more PDP governors will still come out of the closet and say they are supporting President Tinubu. The fear for the rest of us is not about the political choices that they make individually or collectively. They have the right as individuals to make their own choices. It's about the fear of the possibility of a one-party state. Right. Because we could just get to a stage in this country where it's only, not just even APC, Tinubu's party that will be the only party in Nigeria. I think there's an argument to be made for difference, for opposition, for diversity. I think that's one thing that we should worry about as ordinary Nigerians. The second other thing, of course, has to do with the fact that the PDP, there was this point that was made, I think it was by Wike, right? Minister Wike, saying that, look, the PDP does not have the capacity, to stand up to the APC in the 2027 general election. Maybe this is a vindication, backhand vindication of what Minister Wike was saying. Because if all the PDP governors are saying we don't want coalition opposition politics, if some of them are saying we are going to support Baba Tinubu, they are even now calling him as Baba. So they don't even want to criticize him. Maybe Wike is right. Maybe he knows something that we are not aware of.
We're not aware of.
But the fear is about the possibility of a one-party state. I think the contestation, the opposition politics, the current of debate in terms of people expressing different opinions, I think it helps. But if all of us by 2027 will be thinking in one direction, that will not be good for democracy. No. However, what we as Nigerians are asking for, now that Baba Tinubu, has returned from vacation.
You agree with the name?
If an Akwa
governor
is calling him Baba, who am I, a Yoruba man, not to recognize that he's truly Baba. What the Nigerian people just want is service, leadership, results, progress for the benefit of the common good.
Well, Bimba and Adifemi, and also you, Dr. Abati, I believe that there's also a strong need that people want to see that opposition. That is one of the reasons why I think this conversation on coalition and alignment is so rife, in the society right now, because people would love to see where that will come from. Would that come from a coalition of individuals from other parties or from one party? Obviously, that party will not be PDP at this time.
Well, if you look at the president of the last election, it looks nearly impossible to see how that can be achieved with a single party unless something emerges that has super candidates across the board. But having said that, everybody thought that super candidate in the last election would have been Peter Obi, and we saw how the votes were divided. In essence, if there had been some sort of a united opposition, a coalition of sorts, it would have won the election. So I think Nigeria is such a complex nation where demographics are concerned. There's so many interests that one needs to appeal to in order to be able to surpass, especially to unseat an incumbent. It's not something that can be done willy-nilly. So for me, as an individual opposition at the moment, they say 24 hours is a very long time in politics, so we can't discount the fact that somebody from somewhere can still emerge and win people's hearts and win people's love and support in a similar way that Peter Obi did. However, I think one needs to be strategic and realistic in knowing that look at the terrain at the moment. You've got the few remaining PDP governors are all question marks. What happens to their structures in those states? Those structures, in essence, are going to follow follow wherever their principles go. So I think it will be selling tales by the moonlight for us to think that any single party, for now, as it stands today, April 21st, 2025, because anything can happen in politics.
Can happen.
And then very quickly on the issue of precedent. You know, the reason why we always harp on about precedent, respect for rules, laws, constitutions, and organizations, is because if somebody does something today and gets away with it, it's highly likely that somebody else is going to try to do the same thing tomorrow because they've seen that there are no consequences. We spoke about the G5 earlier with the self-proclaimed leader of the G5 himself, Chief Bode George. He said he's not a member, he was a leader. And if those issues where we saw governors working against their own party in 2023 had been addressed, more governors wouldn't have been emboldened to come out and start declaring, because this is anti-party, but it seems that there are no consequences for anti-party activity in the PDP. So, the PDP has set themselves up on this one for being unable to rein in and ensure that their constitution is enforced.
Well, let's take another story in a lighter note, which I think it borders on our culture. It's a situation that I don't think should be surprising. Apparently is very much so. Nigerians are now reacting to a post by Sunday Diary, the special advisor on media and public communication to President Tinubu, praising the First Lady, Remitinubu, for kneeling before the afenifere leader, Paruben Fasoranti, during a recent visit to Akure, Ondo State. The president described Mrs. Tinubu as humility personified after the photo of her greeting the 98-year-old elder statement surfaced online. Sunday Diary, who shared the image on X, formerly known as Twitter, commended the First Lady for her show of respect. However, the post has now sparked mixed reactions, with some social media users criticizing the gesture's publicity, arguing that it held no relevance to national issues. During the visit, Fasoranti praised President Tinubu's leadership and offered prayers for his success. The First Lady described the meeting as informal and part of her 2-day visit to Ondo State, where she launched health and empowerment programs under the Renewed Hope Initiative. We're looking at Dr. Charles K's tweet. At a time when Nigerians are grappling with deepening insecurity, economic hardship, widespread uncertainty as well, it is concerning that you choose to give ceremonial acts more attention than concrete solutions. On to the next tweet. There is nothing unusual or extraordinary in the actions of the First Lady here. It is a long-standing tradition within Yoruba culture for women to greet their elders while kneeling. Let's concentrate on more important issues. Let's take a look at the next tweet. What a great achievement. I believe this is sarcasm at its best. Our First Lady has knees. My hope has indeed been renewed in human anatomy. We're getting there. Good foundation. The next person will kneel and raise up his or her hands. Now, just a couple of days ago, we saw the AFD Bank president, African Development Bank president, kneeling, to greet former President Muhammadu Buhari. I'm not quite sure why this was posted on. I'm trying to understand the direction for it. Kneeling is part of our culture. I will kneel to greet certain people who are older than I am, especially if it comes in a specific environment. If I'm in the comfort of maybe my home, I may not because of a certain level of familiarity. But in certain environments, you kneel to greet. At weddings, brides kneel to greet their in-laws, kneel to greet their parents. But a lot of Nigerians see this as just a show of, for lack of a better word, bebelube. That's just the best way to put it.
The what?
So bebelube is like overdoing. That's why I said for lack of a better word.
You have enjoyed Yoruba land so much. You are also now speaking Yoruba.
No, it's the best way to describe it. They say Omambe like overdo.
Oh,
Omambe.
Is that what you said? You are being Yorubanized. Very good.
That's what I was trying to say.
Very good. But look, this is about culture. I think you answered the question.
Yeah.
And to the two examples that you have cited, they are Yoruba people. Mm-hmm. Respect is very important to Yoruba people. It's part of their upbringing. Maybe Mrs. Remitinubu has not done anything unusual. She's, how old is she? 60-something, maybe 64, right? The man that she's kneeling down to greet is maybe 98, 99.
Yeah.
In Yoruba culture, that is normal. It will have been very odd
if she did it.
For Mrs. Remitinubu, either as First Lady or as wife of President Tinubu to stand on top of the head, to use Yoruba English, of Parfashionati, a 99-year-old man, and no, that would have been very bad optics. Now, the example of also Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, prostrating. He wasn't kneeling down. It was prostrating for President Buhari, who is almost 80 years old enough to be his father. It wasn't a difficult thing for him. It would come to him naturally. And Yoruba people, when I say that, they take respect very important. When you are rude to a Yoruba man who is older than you, what goes on in his head immediately is that your parents did not bring you up properly. In fact, it's like you are insulting your parents. Because he will just look at you and say, who is the parent of this rude, badly brought up child? So it's not like in other cultures, where, as Yorubas say, when they wake up in the morning, they kick their parents to wake their parents up. Yoruba people are very strong on, respect, and all of that, and modesty, unlike some people who have no respect for anybody. Particularly when they think they occupy a position. But in the case...
looking at you if you didn't know.
I was wondering.
No, I wasn't looking at you. But in the case of both Mrs. Tinubu and Dr. Adesina, I don't think they've done anything unusual. I don't know what you people do in Zimbabwe. Maybe you carry cane and beat others.
It's a Nigerian thing. Would you say it's a Yoruba thing, or would you say it's a Nigerian thing?
Well, no, I can only speak about Yoruba culture.
Okay.
I don't know about what other people do. Because I see a lot of very rude, badly brought up people from other environments.
Okay. Well, Adefemi,
yes.
I believe you will be speaking for the Yoruba culture as well.
Yes.
Yes. What would you say?
I don't think this was remarkable. I think what it is, I think perhaps the reaction is perhaps blown out of proportion. It sounds like what the Post initially tried to do was just like a nice moment, like, oh, did you see this? I don't think it's that big of a deal at all. I think it's quite normalized, as Dr. Abati says, for anybody to greet a senior, whether it's age, whether it's in hierarchy in your family or outside of it, to greet them in this way. I just think it's a nice photo and a nice moment, and perhaps the reaction has just been taken out of context. Yes, the First Lady has knees. She does have knees, exactly.
She
used them.
Obviously, like you said, Vimbai, it is common parlance where you're from as well. All right, let's take the next story. The State House has allocated 10 billion naira in the approved 2025 budget for the installation of a solar mini grid at the presidential villa. Now, this story has now sparked reactions amongst many on social media. This comes as the State House budget rose from 47.11 billion naira in the proposed draft to 57.11 billion naira in the approved version. The 10 billion naira increase was traced to a rise in capital expenditure, which grew from 33.55 billion to 43.55 billion. A breakdown shows the entire addition was earmarked for the project titled Solarization of the Villa with solar mini-grids. Now, the move is aimed at cutting reliance on the national grid and cushioning the impact of rising electricity tariffs on government operations. We have a look at some reactions to this story as well. This tweet from Cool Ustaz says, 10 billion for a solar mini-grid at the presidential villa. This is beyond excessive. It's an insult to the millions of Nigeria who are suffering without basic electricity, clean water, or decent healthcare. Under Tinubu's government, we're watching billions being spent to power luxury while the average Nigerian lives in blackouts. What happened to accountability? What happened to prioritizing the masses? This isn't governance, it's greed with the budget line. Another tweet from Uche says 150 million Nigerians now have access to electricity, according to the Minister of Power, Bayo Adelabu. Why we are now spending so much on installation of a solar mini grid at a presidential villa? By isolating the presidential villa from the entire Nigerians, that means there is a problem. Now, we often see situations like this when something happens at the presidential villa or a certain amount of money is earmarked to build a new infrastructure or buy a new plane. For the people, it still boils down to the standard of living. How do you juxtapose these expenses with the standard of living of the people? Does it add up in any way, shape, or form? Then, I'd like you to, just reel this in quickly.
Okay, well, 10 billion for a solar mini grid. Let's talk numbers. So yesterday it was revealed that the banks, I believe the banks have made over 40 trillion from interest, collecting from the increased interest rates from the manufacturing sector specifically. So the manufacturing sector has spent 1.3 trillion of their hard-earned cash on interest rates. They have spent 1.4 trillion on alternative power sources. So we're now at 2-point-something trillion, right? There was also a report just a few weeks ago, I believe it was last week, that the American tariffs are likely to cost the manufacturing sector another 2 to 3 trillion naira. We're now at about 5 to 6 trillion naira. And this is the productive sector of our economy. So if anybody needs their power to be subsidized or needs an installation of the power grid, a mini power grid or a solar grid, why are we not prioritizing the productive sector of our economy, which is going through untold hardship in this because of both domestic factors and external factors? So for me, this is a bit of a tone-deaf development, because when you look at, first of all, 10 billion is a massive amount of money. And for me, I think the focus right now should be on how do we spend our money productively? How does this translate into jobs? How does this translate into the reduction of inflation? How does this translate into food security for our people? At least if the solar grid was said to power irrigation systems into our farms, it would be something. At least if it was said to power some sort of security solutions, it would be something. But all of this for the presidential villa, I think it's very, very unfortunate, a wrong placement of priorities. And this money should be allocated, in my opinion, towards the productive sector of the economy. This is wasteful.
It is. Dr. Abate?
No, very briefly. I just think that when it comes to electricity supply, energy issues in Nigeria, it's important for the Nigerian government to think out of the Aso Rock box, because electricity is something that affects all of us. So if they say they are doing a mini solar grid and budgeting money for it for Aso Villa, how about the rest of Nigeria? The experts who know this subject, the analysts, the professors of law, energy law and all that, they have said, look, we need to decentralize the national grid. We need to look for alternative sources of energy. If they are enjoying solar in Aso Rock, why not provide solar energy also for other parts of Nigeria? 3, the discos and the gencos are saying that they are going to go on strike because they are being owed over 4 trillion naira. Even at a point, Aso Villa was a debtor to the gencos, to the discos, and they had to arrange to pay. Government institutions have not paid for their electricity bills. These are dimensions of the problem. The comfort of the current occupants of Aso Villa should not be the main priority. They should think in providing, in addressing the energy issues of Nigeria out of the Aso Villa box. This is my point.